Hi. I first want to just acknowledge that I am not an expert on boundaries, or if I have any expertise, it's because I have struggled to acquire them, and I'll talk some about that as we go on. This is a Robert Frost poem, Mending Wall, and as the speaker in the poem goes through the poem, he's walking along a stone fence that he and his neighbor are each walking along their sides of it as they work to mend this fence, anything that's fallen down or broken during the winter. And the speaker keeps questioning if fences are really necessary, if this is a really helpful thing. And what I'm going to suggest is clearly that they are. What boundaries do for us is they create some safety and space for us to respond in ways that we want to respond, rather than merely reacting to our fears, and our traumas. So, just to think about, like, if one common boundary in our physical world is our house walls. If you imagine what it would be like to live in a house with no walls, you would be, hypervigilant. You'd be constantly scanning. You'd feel vulnerable. You'd feel like anybody could come in at any time. And so you might react to anybody coming by with kind of an assertive or aggressive defensive stance. And you'd be having to spend a great deal of your time and energy defending that boundary. So what boundaries do for us is, like walls, they present kind of a commonly understood and blockade. They allow good things. They allow you to control what comes in and what goes out to a certain extent. And so that you don't have to be constantly focused on making yourself safe. Personal boundaries that each person can control themselves: their skin, words, emotional distance, physical distance, touch, whether you allow touch or not. Things that you include within your boundaries: your thoughts, your feelings, your desires, your beliefs, your behaviors, your values, your limits, your talents, and your love. Without boundaries, we end up feeling pulled in all directions. We feel overwhelmed, and we want to escape. We end up doing way too much and getting burnt out. Essentially, you don't respect your own limitations. We have a tendency toward angry explosions. It's that defensive reaction when you don't feel like you're safe, and so you have to protect yourself constantly. Sometimes these come out directly to a boundary crossing, and you verbally or physically attack the person coming out after you, but often they come out sideways, which means perhaps I'm angry at my spouse for something he's doing, but instead of confront him directly, I just let the anger build, and then when my kids misbehave, I unleash a lot of anger, more than necessary, on them. It can also come with some passive aggressiveness. My best example in my own life of this was when I was young as a nanny, and there was the family I was working for constantly trampled my boundaries, and my boundaries were not good, so I allowed them to constantly increase my hours and increase my duties, and until I had a ridiculous amount of things I was supposed to be doing, and I was working ridiculously long hours with no extra pay. And the way that I dealt with it when I was 19 was I made brownies, not as an outlet for my creativity, but because the wife in the family was incredibly weight conscious. And I got very good at judging exactly how many brownies to leave out. If I left out one, she would eat it and not feel bad. If I left out 10, she would eat one and wrap the rest up and put them in the freezer and not feel bad. But if I left out 4, she would eat them all and be really upset. So that's an example of kind of the passive-aggressive ways that we can deal with the anger that comes at people crossing our boundaries. Depression is also another common reaction to not having boundaries. People take on too much, they become too overwhelmed. If I am depressed and laying in bed, nobody can expect anything of me, and my boundaries are established just by that. Physical illness can sometimes play a similar role. So we do try and escape. We tend to move towards activities that can be numbing, that can include time wasters, addictions, alcohol, pornography, food, anything that can numb us, video games, anything that can kind of take the edge off of what you have to do. In one of my jobs a while back when I had there was a lot of paperwork involved in it, and I would frequently get very, very behind in it. And my joke was that you could tell how behind I was in my paperwork because it was proportional to the amount of time I was spending on playing solitaire on the computer. So I want to go over some things to consider. These aren't really, one book called these one book called them principles. I don't know. I don't like those words, so things to think about as you're trying to set boundaries and you're trying to do better at boundary setting. The first is that boundaries have a lot to do with consequences. We are supposed to learn from cause and effect. One of the problems around boundaries is we are not allowing the natural cause and effects to take place. We are stepping in and protecting people or solving problems. Examples include times that people, maybe kids get into debt and parents step up and pay off the debt, in which case the child has not really learned how to struggle or learned how to get out of the debt. They didn't have to face the consequences. Or perhaps there's something going on that makes me really upset and angry, but I hide those feelings from somebody. I protect them from my feelings so that they don't know what they're causing and they don't know that what their behavior is doing to me or the relationship. I had a friend, we both had children at the same time, and she went crazy baby-proofing her house. I mean, every corner, every edge in her home was padded, and she did all the normal stuff, but she did all this extra stuff. The result was that by age 4, her son had 3 broken arms. I think because he would jump off the couch and land on the padded furniture and face little consequence, and so not really learn that that wasn't an appropriate thing to do, and so he was taking too many risks. Another thing to be thinking about is responsibility. I liked this picture because I think sometimes we do feel like we're responsible for the whole world. In a book called Boundaries, the authors Dr. Cloud and Townsend write, "We are responsible for ourselves. We are responsible to other people." So all too often we take on responsibility for other people. One of the ways that they talk about this is we are to love one another, not be one another. I can't feel for you. I can't think for you. I can't learn for you. I can't behave for you. I can't work through the disappointments that your limits create for you. I can only do that for myself. Another kind of description, a way to think about this is they call it the difference between a pack and a burden. We're all responsible for carrying our own packs. Packs are your daily responsibilities, things that the normal things that kind of normal people are expected to take care of. Getting up, getting ready, eating, taking good care of your physical body, sleeping, going to school or working, whatever your current life situation entails. Burdens are the extraordinary things, the things that we don't expect any one person to just be able to handle everything that comes their way. These can include physical illness that impacts even your ability to take care of the normal pack of life. All of those kinds of things that become too much, and you really need the support of your people in order to really move forward. So when we are taking over other people's packs, we are not allowing them to do what they can and should do for themselves, and so we end up feeling overwhelmed and resentful because they aren't doing that, and we're doing it ourselves. Power is another thing to think about when you think about boundaries, in the sense that there's only one person in this universe that you really have any chance of having power over, and that is yourself. You can't change other people, you can only influence them. As parents, I think we often kind of have an illusion that we control our children. I know I did with my first 2. They were quite compliant little girls, and I was patting myself on the back frequently for what a good parent I was, until my third kid came, and I did all the same things, and he threw everything about parenting on to the side for me, and I had to recognize that it's not so much that I was a great parent with my girls, it's that they were really good and compliant kids, and I had to learn and grow a whole lot of new abilities with my son. But the point being is we don't control these other people. They choose to comply or not to comply, and how we present that does have a lot of impact on how they do, but it isn't control. So one thing to kind of keep in mind is, since you cannot control someone else, you can't change someone else, the only person you can do is change yourself. So what you want to focus on in any given situation is, what do I need to change to influence the outcome of this, to have at the very least a different outcome for myself, but hopefully a different outcome with other people involved as well. A friend of mine had a mother that had always been super controlling and overbearing, and she started trying to set some boundaries with her mother, and she did it first by saying she couldn't see her mom for a while, and that's sometimes necessary to have some good physical distance so that you can grow some strength and figure out who you are and what you want. But when she started to engage with her mother again, she started it by sending her a list of things her mother was not allowed to do anymore. You can't talk to me about your weight anymore, or about my weight anymore. You can't criticize my husband. You can't tell me how to spend my time. You can't criticize the activities I'm engaged in. I don't know if you've ever tried something like that, but you can imagine it didn't go very well. Mom didn't take it too kindly. And that's not the biggest point. I mean, because I think people, even when we set boundaries well, people can get angry and upset. But the biggest point was that if I was to change the way my friend approached that, I would have had her talk more about herself. If you choose to bring up my weight, I will leave the conversation. If you criticize my husband, I will let you know that that's not okay, and if you continue to, I'll hang up. That's the part of the boundaries that you control. We actually would like it if people became really responsible and respected all of our boundaries. Them to stop wanting things from us. We want them to stop wanting us to be different or needing things from us. But that's not even fair to them, I guess, to expect them to not have those needs and wants. Especially if you're talking about kids. Your kids are going to push against your boundaries all the time. That's part of their growing up. And so we do have to do the difficult work of setting the boundaries and defending them. So respect is another idea that I want to talk about regarding boundaries. The first point is that we have to respect our own boundaries, even when others do not. I have to get really clear about what my wants and my needs and what I desire, and I have to be able to hold to that. I have to be able to say, yes, this is important, even when somebody else is telling me that it's not, or that it's not fair. It really is okay if people get angry about you having boundaries. Some people have said to me, I can't just do whatever I want without considering other people, and that's true. The point with boundaries is that you are considering other people. You are carefully considering your actions. You are choosing and really selecting what you're doing and how you're responding to things. And you are taking into consideration how it will impact others. And you are still deciding to move forward. One kind of principle that's kind of nice to be thinking about when you think about this is the concept, the difference between hurt and harm. So hurt is, some kind of temporary pain. So like, for example, you go to the dentist. It hurts a lot of times. The things that the dentist do hurt. But do they harm you? No. In fact, in general, and the idea is that it helps you, right? On the other hand, there are lots of things we engage in that don't hurt, like eating a lot, and yet it harms us over time. And so it's really kind of important to kind of get, when I'm thinking about how my boundary setting is gonna affect someone else, is this gonna hurt them? It'll cause them some discomfort, some inconvenience perhaps. or is this going to actually harm somebody? And I don't want to harm anybody, but it is okay to inconvenience somebody or to even irritate them or frustrate them. So here's a long list of the kinds of things that motivate our behavior often. Fear of loss of love, fear of somebody's anger, fear of loneliness, guilt, payback, approval. All of those I've named so far, are not good motivations. If you are asking yourself why you're doing a certain behavior for somebody else, or why you're responding in a certain way, if it's any of those, it's an opportunity for you to step back and rethink your boundaries and rethink what you're going to do with that. Doing something for any of those reasons, I guess all I can say is kind of it's painful. It's painful to the giver, you, and it's painful to the receiver. I don't know if any of you have been in the receiving end of somebody who is kind of scraping from the bottom of their barrel and kind of unwillingly, or they want to give it to you but they really don't have it to give, or you can tell they're giving it just because they don't, maybe they don't want you to be angry at them. It's not really pleasant. It doesn't really feel very good. And so gratitude, desire, and love, those are good motivations. I can do things for people, but it really has to be my choice. It has to be coming from a place of freedom, where I have the opportunity. I can say no to this, but I'm choosing to say yes. And that's really giving and doing. One of the things I think that comes up frequently when I talk with people about boundaries is the fear of being selfish. The fear that I start setting boundaries, it's selfish. It's selfish to think of myself first. It's selfish to do things. But I think you could each see, and maybe I'm not sure that each person set their boundary, in the most kind or way, but you knew when it crossed the line, right? Right? Yeah. And I think that we do have a sense of when it crosses a line, when it's that clear. It's not always as clear, and to be honest, I think our ability to tell that gets thrown off. We have, I think that a lot of people tend to err on the side of selflessness. And so I really like this quote where she talks about, in order to be selfless, you actually have to have a self. You have to, she says, become your best and most authentic self, and that requires taking time to invest in energy in your own personal development, which is part of the process of becoming selfless. The way I think about this, what this requires is it requires me developing an understanding of myself. I need to know what my thoughts are, how I think about something. I need to know my opinions. I need to know what my feelings are. I need to know what I desire. My grandmother lived in poverty most of her extreme poverty or childhood, and then still not doing well in adulthood. And when she was about 80, she came into some inheritance. And this woman who had, lived on a small farm her whole life, wanting nothing apparently, or it seemed, all of a sudden said, "I want a ruby ring. I want to go to Hawaii. I want to go to Disneyland, and I want to go to Price is Right." And what's kind of sad for me about that is she got to go to everything but Price is Right. That wasn't showing during the right time period. But was one, she did that when she was 80. She went to Hawaii at the age of 80, 60, 70% blind. I just think her experience could have been so much better differently at a different time in her life. And to be honest, she had children who could have assisted her with those dreams had they known what they were. They would have gladly made those things possible with their own money if she had just mentioned that she even wanted anything. Becoming a self also requires taking good care of yourself on a consistent basis, taking good care of yourself physically and emotionally and spiritually and socially. It also means developing yourself, giving yourself time to follow your passions, do things that really make you feel energized and alive. It's that difference. When you're doing these things, when you're taking care of yourself, when you know yourself, and when you follow your passions, you actually have something to give. You are giving from your abundance rather than from the bottom of the barrel. And I guess one of the pieces there is that you actually have to value yourself. It's much easier to set boundaries if you value what you're setting boundaries around. Dr. Snarch, who is a sex therapist, has this definition of what he calls the solid, flexible self, and you'll see it's trademarked. Don't try and steal that. But your solid, flexible self, it's the ability to kind of hold on to yourself, know who you are, know what your ideas are, even when, he says your spouse, but I would say anybody is trying to kind of push you in another way. I do like that he includes the word flexible, because I do want to be able to kind of take in what other people say, and I want to be able to consider it, but I don't want to be blown around by the wind all the time. I want to, be able to hang on to my own thoughts and ideas. So, anger. I think I felt like anger got a pretty bad rap. I don't know if you've seen this movie. Even in this movie, he wasn't portrayed particularly nicely or importantly. You get to see in this movie the important role that sadness has and why it's necessary, but anger just seems to be kind of breaking things and getting in the way all the time. I think that one of the things that we need to really be paying attention to with anger is that it's a signal, it's a sign. It doesn't mean we have the license to just haul off and hit people or yell and scream, but we do need to see our own anger as a signal that something isn't right. I guess basically anger is a result of whatever is happening not meeting our expectations. So let's say I leave to run my kids around to all their various activities, and my hope is that when I come home, the dishes will have been done by either the kids or the husband. I don't really even care who, but just that they're done. I open the door and see all the dishes there. I feel, angry is probably what I'm most aware of feeling. But underneath of that anger is probably also some hurt, feeling undervalued and unappreciated, perhaps even feeling abandoned. I thought we were partners in our family, and apparently other people aren't seeing it quite the same way. And one kind of tricky thing about that is often we aren't even aware of our own expectations. Maybe I didn't even realize dishes to be done until I walked in the house and saw that they weren't. And if I don't know I want them done, I clearly didn't ask anybody or suggest that anybody do them. I didn't let anybody else know that that was my expectation. So that's coming back to that idea of you really need to understand yourself and be clear about what you want. So as you're starting to set boundaries, Dr. Julie Hanks, who we saw a little clip of, or a little piece of from before, has a really nice analogy about anger or about setting boundaries that I really like. She talks about that there's three possible ways of setting a boundary. One is the doormat approach. So just laying flat and letting everybody letting things just, taking on everything everybody asks you to do, trying to make everything right for everybody, taking care of everybody else's emotions, being taken advantage of. The second approach she describes is the sword approach. So often if you've been a doormat very long, you will stand up and start using a sword to defend your boundaries. And when I think of a sword, you are intruding in on somebody else's boundaries, trying to not just defend yours, but trying to drive them back and away and trying to change what they're doing in their space as well. And then the third approach, which is the one she recommends we take, she calls the lantern approach. So this is what I really try and do when I'm trying to decide what kind of boundaries I want to set with people. She says, think of it as you're holding up a lantern and you're showing somebody your thoughts and feelings and desires and hopes and needs. So that could be, I'm really hoping, I can't do everything in this house. I can't run all these errands and get everything done at home. And so I'm really hoping that somebody, you, husband, will pitch in and help out here. I'm not telling him he has to do it, and I'm not saying, and if you don't, I'm going to be really mad and pout for the rest of the day, and I'm not trying to strong arm him with the sword. I'm just telling him what it will be like for me whatever way he, goes. Another part of the lantern that I really like to kind of keep in mind is there's a stillness to it. Where the sword intrudes into other people's space and the doormat withdraws, the lantern holds firm. So one of the ways I think about this, or one of the ways that thought is helpful to me, is that I may not get the result I'm wanting. I may go and come back, even if my husband that I just done, he may not do it. But that doesn't mean I stop wanting it, and doesn't mean I stop letting him know that that's what I wanted or that I was disappointed. So I hold firm to those. I don't just say, oh, well, it wasn't really that important to me anyway, because that's really betraying myself. I hold firm on that. But I also don't go in yelling and screaming and telling him, what a blankety blank he is for not doing what I wanted him to do. And we'll talk about maybe some ways what you might do. But I guess I should talk about that now. What holding firm might mean is saying, I really was hoping this was done, and I'm feeling abandoned and hurt by the fact that it's not. What can we do about this? How can we make this work? Let's move to a little bit about kind of how do we set these boundaries? What are kind of the steps? So the first part is really recognizing the symptoms. You have to recognize your anger, your frustration, your hurt, whatever those feelings are that are coming up that are telling you that your boundary has been crossed. Think of it as your security system. Somebody enters your house without your permission, an alarm goes off. This is like an alarm. Again, it doesn't mean you have to call in the SWAT team to take them out, but it does mean you have to do something to defend that boundary or to re-clarify that boundary is there. Going back to the emotions piece, that it's, even with our own emotions, it's to write them off, and with other people's too. When my daughter was about 6, I think, she was really upset about something that was going on. I can't remember what it was, but she was just super mad and super angry, and I was trying to kind of, I guess I was trying to be a therapist and trying to help her to see, like, in the scheme of life, it wasn't that big a deal. It was, not something to go into a huge upsetness about, like as if life was being threatened. And so I was telling her that. I was saying, on a scale where 0 is like nothing's happened and 10 is, your life is threatened, where does this fall? And she said, it's a 12. And I said to her, you do not feel that upset about this. And maybe this is because she was raised by a therapist, but she put her hands on her hip like this, and she said, you cannot tell me what I feel. And so I had to back up and tell her that was true. But I like that image. I kind of call up that image sometimes when I'm uncomfortable with how somebody is responding and I really want them to respond differently. I really want them to feel differently. And I don't control, and I don't know, and I don't understand what their experience is. I only can know my own. So I guess in that circumstance, what I really needed to be more aware of was why I was feeling so distressed that she was angry, and focus less on getting her to calm down and more on me getting okay so that I could feel less anxious, which I believe helps her feel less anxious and helps her regulate and settle down. But because I wasn't really even paying attention to myself, I really couldn't help her. So the next step is to really kind of get clear on what the need is and what you are, can do. This is a good place to kind of brainstorm. There are lots of possible solutions to problems. This is a good time to kind of bring other people into the mix at times. Not every problem you can bring people into the mix, but you can bring the people who are considered, who are influenced or affected by this, or who you are having a problem with. You can help them be part of the solution. You can invite them in. You can, help be clear with them about what your needs and wants and hopes are, and then try and think of what is the best way for us to meet this need. Since we're here with the sex addiction clinic, I'm thinking of quite a few boundary setting things that happen in those kind of circumstances. And one of the things I really try and help people to do is, as you're setting boundaries, it can't always work this way. What you really want to be focused on is kind of what you need, not what the other person has to do. So that's what I mean, I think, when I'm saying brainstorming. What you're really wanting to do is be open to a variety of ways to get that need met, rather than really fixating on it has to be this one thing and this person has to do it for me or I'm not going to be okay. I just think that when I just know my own reaction. When I'm told you have to do something this way, I don't care that I am 48. I feel like I'm 13, and I just want to say absolutely not. That is not going to happen. And so I think other people feel the same way when they're told you have to do this for me or I'm going to die. They, either they want to rebel from that or they want to comply, but for the wrong motivations. They're doing it for the wrong reasons. We'll try and kind of talk, maybe we can brainstorm as a group some possible boundary problems. When I'm standing up here, it gets hard to think of clear examples, but maybe you guys can come up with things that at the end we can kind of talk about possible ways of handling different boundary problems. The next step is to decide what your backup plan is. And some things on boundaries, they call these consequences, but what I don't like about the word consequence is it sounds like I'm needing to met out a punishment for what just happened or didn't happen. And I don't think that that's very effective. Sometimes there are kind of consequences that are involved in it, but that's not the focus for me. The focus should be on really getting my needs met. So if I've stated a need and the person I've come to is unable to meet the need, I still have that need and I still need to get it met. And so rather than focusing on how to strong arm that person to do what I want them to do, I really want to focus on how am I going to get that need met in some other way. So, going back to the example of, the housework not getting done, and I really can't do it all by myself, I might, come up with a plan, and this has some consequences. So I might say, if people aren't pitching in to help out more, I will be taking money out of our entertainment fund, our family entertainment fund, to pay for a housekeeper. Or I will be going ahead and cleaning more, but I will be having less time to spend on creating the meals then. So we are going to be eating more soup and cereal, and I'm not going to have the time to cook. Or perhaps if the dishes aren't done, I just won't be able to cook the next meal. And I'll fend for myself, and if I have young kids, maybe I'll throw them some cheese and crackers and apples, but I'm not going to cook in a kitchen where I don't have access to all the things I need. And you can keep brainstorming and coming up. This is another good place for brainstorming because you don't want to get stuck on there's only one way to solve this problem. One of my key words is always when I hear myself think like there's only this solution or that solution. And sometimes we call that being between a rock and a hard place. And we use that to justify whatever choice we made. Well, it was, I either had to do this, which is a horrible, terrible thing, or I had to do this, which is that bad, but of course better than this, so of course I did it this way. And whenever I hear myself using that kind of thinking, that is absolutely my signal to myself to stop whatever I'm doing, regroup, rethink, get out of the argument, whatever I'm in, and really sit down and try and set a different boundary and brainstorm some other better ideas. I try and tell myself between this rock and this hard place, there have to be hundreds, if not thousands, of other possibilities. And surely I'm creative and smart enough to come up with at least 3 of those. And so I really try and push myself to do that. So the next part is considering the risks. you really have to think through what might happen if I set this boundary. And you need to decide if it's something that you're willing to face. Because I discourage people from taking steps that they can't follow through with, that they're really not willing or able to stick with. It just makes you feel like a failure. I would rather somebody set the tiniest boundary and complete it than a really ideal, perfect boundary and get disappointed and frustrated with it and walk away from it. And one thing to keep in mind is often people do react harshly to the boundaries that we set. The family that I was a nanny for, I went back and worked for them when I was a little bit older. And as I set boundaries and said, no, I won't come in at that time. No, you told me you would be home at 6 o'clock every night, and I need you to be home at 6 o'clock because I have a life. I have things that I need to do. And they would come back with me, well, we're earning money. We're working during this time. What are you going to be doing? And that's not really your business, and that's not really part of the plan. These were the things, this is what we agreed on, and my life is important, just as important as your life. And so if you have other needs, you need to figure out another way to meet them because I can't meet them. I was told, what was it I was told? I was told I had become hardened, I think is what the word that they used. And I was told I was being selfish. And at one point she burst into tears because her life was so horrible and overwhelming that I had to meet this need for her. And honestly, it was really hard to kind of stay firm in that I wasn't going to do that. But it was really preferable to making brownies for her. It felt much better in the long run. Another piece is like when I started setting boundaries with my mom. My mom once said that I had gone from being her nice daughter to her mean daughter, which was a little painful to hear. But I chose to say, that means I'm succeeding. If I'm getting a reaction from some people, that means I'm succeeding. I will kind of add that more recently she has called me her daughter who's not afraid to say what she means. So you also have to find some way to communicate those boundaries and let people know what they are. I think this can mean a lot of different things. In some situations, it's going to mean clearly sitting down and saying, things have to change. This is unacceptable to me. Here's a plan that I've come up with, or what kind of things can we plan? This has to be different. Sometimes it's not as clear as that. Sometimes it's just saying what you feel. There was this one, I'll go back to my early years of marriage when I was frustrated with, I don't even remember what I was mad about, but I know that I was awake at about 3 a.m. thinking about it, and so decided to get up and do some housework. And I know this had been frustrating me for some time. I was just really roiled up about it. And so I'm out cleaning the kitchen, slamming cupboards, shoving pans in. My husband comes out and says, I just remember the tired on his, this just newly woken up, and he's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm cleaning the kitchen. And he said, what's wrong? Absolutely nothing. And it took a long time for him to pull out from me what it was that I was mad at. And it's funny looking back on that is that I honestly was not connecting the way that I was cleaning the kitchen to those feelings. I don't know that I think I thought that they weren't really coming out. So fast forward many years, and there was a night that this was happening frequently, but as I was putting our kids to bed, as I was doing all that thing, I suddenly realized my husband was nowhere to be found. And when I peeked into the bedroom, he was actually asleep. He didn't tell me he was going to bed. He just kind of left, which again, with that abandoned feeling of one of my thoughts was if I couldn't do that. I would never just go to bed and assume that somebody else was going to take care of everything here. And so this one night when this happened, I was just really frustrated because we had talked about it several times. And so I was really mad, but he was already asleep. I'm not going to wake him up and stab him with anything, real or metaphorically. So I just finished what we were doing. The next day, we left. We went to work. We actually had a date planned, so we went out on our date. We had a lot of fun. And as we are driving home, I remembered how mad I was at him. And I thought, I don't want to spoil this. We've had a nice night. I don't want to spoil it. It was not a big deal. It was last night. It's not tonight. But I made myself. I was quiet for a minute, and I said, you have to do this. And so I said, I was really mad at you last night. And he said, I know. And it led to this really nice discussion. In that case, he didn't know I was mad because I was throwing stuff around. He just knew that I was going to be mad by his behavior, which I thought was good for me. It was like a step forward for me. What it led to a discussion about was how he feels when he's exhausted at night and knows I need help and knows I deserve help, but he knows he can't do it. And he talked about feeling ashamed at that moment. He can't even look me in the eye and tell me that he needs to go to bed because he knows I deserve more than that, and so he just sneaks off and goes to bed. And we kind of brainstormed some other ways of doing that would feel better to me and would, at least try and meet some of the needs we both had. And I guess if I was going to say what the boundary we came up with is that he just has to tell me. Like, I will try not to be super upset and angry, but when he has to go to bed, he just has to let me know that he's crossed my boundary if he disappears without talking to me about it. And I think one of the things that's important to me, though, is because it cheats me of the opportunity to be mad at him, to be mad to his face. Is that weird? I don't know, maybe that's weird. I really like that he has to actually look me in the eye and tell me that he's going to bed and see that that's hard for me, and then he can go to bed. I don't care. And I get it. He's a morning person. I'm a night person. So I get it. It makes sense. It fits with actually our personalities and our physical needs. And so even if it's not perfect, it's still. Sometimes when you're setting boundaries, they don't get communicated verbally or pre-planned with the person, but you do it with your feet. There was one time that my father-in-law was known for being pretty harsh at times, and there was one time I walked into a room when we were visiting, and as I walked into the room, everything got quiet, and I didn't know what had happened, but clearly something had happened, and they were particularly uncomfortable with me being there. I think because I was known for getting mad at things that happened there. So all I could tell was that it was something around my 4-year-old daughter. And so at the moment, I just kind of swooped her up in my arms and left. Basically just, I didn't know what had happened, but it was my way of kind of defending. Whatever happened wasn't okay. I can feel it. And what it kind of turned out to be was that my father-in-law had wanted my daughter to hug him, and she had said no. And he had yelled at her and told her that he pays for her preschool, and so she needed to hug him. And so it was just this instinctual, I just knew that I needed to get her away from there and make it clear. And so my father-in-law came to me later and apologized for getting so mad and yelling and scaring my daughter. And I got to share with him why I didn't like what he had done. I was able to tell him, my daughter doesn't even know preschool gets paid for, let alone who pays for it. And second, if she doesn't want to hug somebody, she does not have to hug somebody. And you have to earn her hugs, not demand them. And you earn them by being a safe person and respecting her boundaries. And what was really kind of fun about that, and again, I always look for these times that show that I'm getting better at this because I've been so bad at it in the past. What was fun was one of his daughter came up to me later and said she'd never seen him apologize to anybody, and she'd never seen him sit through somebody telling him while they were mad. And so I don't know. I know I'm patting myself on the back, but it's really because I like to see the progress that I've made. So sometimes, the boundary set will be just more in the moment. Your sister-in-law, gives you parenting advice, and you in the moment say, I appreciate, I know you have good intentions, but I advice isn't what I'm looking for right now. I was just sharing a story. When I need advice, I will ask you for what I need. And that's kind of hard. I'm going to spend a couple minutes, have a couple slides on just one of the most powerful boundaries and ways of kind of expressing boundaries that I think is really hard, and that is no. Studies have actually shown that so your brain reacts positively to good stimuli, right? To nice things that happens. It reacts and it likes it. But one of the things that they found is that your brain reacts wildly to negative stimuli, and it reacts particularly negative to the word no. So just saying the word no to somebody creates an emotional reaction and physical reaction for them. I mean, the truth is no hurts. It does hurt people, and yet it's often what's absolutely necessary. One of my clients told me that one of the thoughts, something that she had read somewhere was that every yes that you say is a no to something else. We just aren't as clear about it. And so it's just really important to be really thoughtful about what we're saying yes to and what we are going to do, because it does limit what else you're supposed to do. Dr. Brene Brown has a great clip on the internet where she's talking about a phrase that she uses. She has a ring. She says it spins. And when anybody asks her to do something, she spins her ring 3 times. And while she's spinning it, she thinks of the phrase, choose discomfort over resentment. So choose the discomfort of facing this person and saying and disappointing them or even making them angry over my own resentment. And she uses an example of, she goes to drop her child off at school and somebody there says, hey, can you bring some cookies tonight to the meeting? And she'll go, sure. And, then she says at home that night, my kids want me to be present with them, and I would like to be present with them, and instead I'm in the kitchen making, these cookies, going, I hate that school, I hate that person, I hope these kids choke on the cookies, and that's that kind of bottom of the barrel giving when we really can't or shouldn't be, and don't want to be. That's that giving that doesn't feel good to the giver or to the receiver. So that phrase is one that I hang on to a lot. Choose discomfort over resentment. Because one of the things I really kind of like, because sometimes I'll have a thought like, I can't say that to them because they'll be mad. And then I remind myself, but if you don't say that to them, you will be mad, right? And one of the things I try and remember, I don't know how they're going to feel, really. And I'm not in charge of how they feel, and I'm not in, how they handle that is up to them. But I know I will be mad, and that will be a problem. So I need to take care of myself first, and then if they're mad, we can deal with that, we can work through it. And just kind of as you're thinking about your kids and their boundaries, allowing them to say no, and allowing them to, and helping them to learn when it is okay to say no and when it's not, or how to appropriately say no, is one of the best tools that you can give them for their boundaries. Whether it's telling them, no, they don't have to, let somebody touch them if they don't want to. They don't have to let somebody hug them. That if you're tickling and wrestling and they say, no, I'm done, they are done. If they say no, to something else, and my difficult son that I mentioned before, no is his first word to anything. You can say, hey, do you want to go to the park? No. Okay, we get at the park. He's having a fun time playing. Hey, let's go get ice cream. No. Just anything he'll say no to. So it's been a struggle over the last 9 years of his life to help him to understand that that's not really what he means, and that he needs to be more careful with how he uses that word, and more thoughtful and really know what it is he wants so that he can use it well. Dr. Julie Hanks has a nice list online that you can find of helpful phrases for saying no. I can't give you an answer right now. Will you check back with me? I want to, but I'm unable to. I'm not able to commit to that right now. I like that one because it kind of leaves it open. I don't know right now. I can't say yes, and so I'm going to say no, is what you're saying. And, but that might change. So I understand you really need my help, but I'm not able to say yes right now. I'm sorry. I mean, you can have empathy. You can understand that you're not meeting someone's needs. No, I can't do that, but here is what I can do. And I just don't have that to give right now. I want to touch on really briefly just the times when, your needs and somebody else's needs don't up because you can't meet everybody all the time and they can't always meet yours. And the example that with that was another example with my husband when I had a friend come to town. And it was a friend that I hadn't seen in a really long time. And so when she was there for 3 days, I didn't work and I didn't cook dinner for anybody and I wasn't around. And my husband texted me at one point and said, I'm having a really stressful day at work. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. Hey, look, this is what I'm having for brunch. And I took a picture and sent it. And so after my friend left, I come home from the airport and go into the office and my husband he didn't really let loose. He's not really like super angry, one to kind of really be super angry. But he did say, I really needed you. This was the worst week of my entire work career, and you were not there for me. And my first reaction was, my first thought was, oh my gosh, I've let him down. I should have been there for him. And then my second reaction, and these happened like this, my second reaction, I deserved some time. I never get free time. We've been thinking that I should have given up my time to meet your needs. And luckily neither of those, I was able to kind of quickly move to the third reaction, which is, we're both right. And that was the one I went with. And I said, you're right. I wasn't there for you. You needed me. It was hard, that was very hard for you. And I deserved some time for myself. I deserved to have this time where I can enjoy myself. And it's really sad that our needs didn't line up right now. And he told me later that wasn't extremely satisfying at the moment. He would have much rather I cried and told him I would do better next time, I think. But in the long term, it was what he needed to hear. So I'm going to kind of end with this Viktor Frankl quote. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And for me, that is what boundaries do. They help us to plan that space. They help us to use that space and so that we can plan that response, so that we are behaving as the people we want to be and our best selves, rather than our scared and traumatized selves.
I have a question that's been on my mind. I have a sister that's disabled. And she keeps bringing males into her life that have, boyfriends in succession that are rage addicts and that have been in prison for raging. And I'm in a situation right now to where her boyfriend blew up at me, yet they want to use my car. They want to, they're basically both either mentally disabled or physically disabled. They're So I don't know how to, and I grew up in a family also to where there was a lot of don't talk about. And so for me, I'm working with the therapist right now about some of this stuff. So I don't know what to do about this situation because she doesn't want me to talk to him about things because he's a rage addict. And I have a hard time because I can't be honest about what my needs are. And I feel bad because my sister's disabled. So I have all these,
That's complicated.
Very complicated, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Really complex. But I think that you have it sounds like some good gut instincts that you shouldn't have to have this person be part of your life just because your sister is part of your life. Is that?
It's just that, their cars broke down because they can't provide for themselves because their life is just messed up and they can't work in community. And, and I know that my sister came from extreme trauma as a child and has a lot of physical disabilities too. So, it's like I want to do work on myself and be, hope and be a part of a story. But if she keeps being in a situation where she basically can't handle her own emotions, she goes into rage herself. So she almost matches the rage and brings it to her in her relationships.
Yeah.
So my therapist says don't have any expectations, and you need to hold yourself boundaries and not be around her if that's what's going to be okay for yourself.
Yeah.
So.
And is that the struggle? It's hard to do that? It feels bad.
It is a struggle because she's always been there for me.
Right. So I might be thinking about ways that you can be there for her that keep you safe. So it might mean I'm not willing to let you drive my car, but I will take you to your doctor appointment as long as he's not with us. Or it could be I don't like the way he talks to me, and so I won't be a part of that. And I really don't like the way he talks to you and the way he treats you. And so when he's around you, I can't be there because that's just not good for me to see.
I truly feel he is not capable of hearing.
Yeah. No, I'm not talking about talking to him. I'm actually talking about talking to her.
So I've already instinctively, it's just like, this guy can't hear me.
So you're wanting to find some ways to kind of be there for her, and so you just got to figure out what that is. But I think your therapist is right on that you have to kind of hold back. And you think of it as the hurt versus the harm thing. Yeah, they may not have a ride to someplace they want to go, but long term, they're not having to increase their work potential or face their, limitations because if you're stepping in to solve those problems for them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.